Laughing lawyer boy defends his mother in court. Little did they know he's a genius. Jennifer Parker held her son's hand tightly as tears stubbornly streamed down her face. The courtroom was packed, and she knew everyone there expected her to lose. 3 lawyers had already dropped the case due to lack of payment, and now she stood alone against her ex-husband and his million-dollar attorney. That's when Tyler, just 10 years old, stood up, trembling beside the table, and said in a steady voice, "Your Honor, I'd like to speak in my mother's defense." Laughter echoed through the courtroom. Dr. Richard Thompson, the most expensive lawyer in New York City, couldn't contain his mocking grin. His perfectly styled gray hair swayed as he turned to his colleagues, as if watching a comedy show. "Your Honor, is this a joke?" Richard said, still smiling. "A child can't represent anyone in court. This is a waste of time." Judge William Harris looked at the skinny boy wearing a light blue shirt and a borrowed tie from the neighbor. There was something in the boy's eyes that intrigued him, maybe pity, maybe genuine curiosity. "I'll allow the minor to speak," the judge decided, but only for a few minutes. Jennifer tugged her son's arm, whispering, "Tyler, sit down. This isn't the place for you." "Mom, I studied," the boy replied, looking straight into her eyes. "Trust me, please." Across the room, Brian Parker, her ex-husband, adjusted the lapel of his expensive suit and whispered something to his lawyer. Richard nodded confidently and crossed his arms, as if waiting for a childish game to end quickly. Tyler took a deep breath and began, "Your Honor, I'd like to cite Article 1659 of the United States Civil Code, which addresses indirect contributions to family assets." Richard's smile began to fade. That wasn't the kind of vocabulary a 10-year-old should know. "My mother, during 8 years of marriage, dedicated 16 hours daily to domestic and family care," Tyler continued, holding a few papers with trembling hands. "According to the U.S. Census Bureau, unpaid domestic work accounts for 11% of the national GDP. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Now, back to it." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The court clerk, Ms. Peterson, who had worked there for 20 years, had never seen anything like it. She discreetly opened the civil code on her computer to check if the boy was right. "Where did a child learn these things?" someone in the audience whispered. Richard stood up, trying to regain control. "Your Honor, this is clearly rehearsed. The child was coached to memorize a few lines for sympathy." Tyler stared right at him. "Dr. Thompson, would you like me to explain the difference between partial and universal community property? Or should I detail the Supreme Court precedents on indirect asset contributions?" The million-dollar lawyer felt a chill. There was something about how this boy spoke that deeply unsettled him. "My mother," Tyler continued, "saved $847,350 in services that didn't need to be hired during the marriage. I have all the receipts here." Jennifer looked at her son with a mix of pride and terror. Where had her boy gotten those numbers? How did he know all this? Brian fidgeted in his seat. Those figures seemed too precise to be made up. "Tyler," the judge leaned forward, intrigued. "Where did you learn about law?" "At the public library, Your Honor. While my mother cleaned the office building next door, I stayed there studying. I read all the civil, labor, and civil procedure codes. It took me 6 months." 6 months? Judge William couldn't hide his surprise. "To read all that?" "Yes, sir. I also read 847 rulings related to asset division and family contributions." Richard tried a new strategy. "Your Honor, even if the child was trained to repeat this information, he can't present evidence in court. He lacks legal capacity." Actually, Tyler opened a folder he'd brought with him. "My mother appointed me as her representative through a specific power of attorney. Article 66 of the United States Civil Code allows a minor to act as an attorney in specific cases, as long as authorized by their parents. Judge William asked to see the document. The power of attorney was flawless, written in impeccable legal language. "Who drafted this?" asked the judge. "I did, Your Honor. I used the templates available on the court's official website." Jennifer held her chest, feeling her heart race. She had no idea Tyler had done all that. Richard began to sweat. In 30 years of practice, he'd never felt threatened by a child. But something was very wrong here. "I'd like to display a chart, if possible," said Tyler, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "A chart?" The judge raised his eyebrows. "Yes, sir, it shows the family's asset growth versus each spouse's working hours over the last 8 years. Judge William allowed it, and Tyler connected the device to the court's computer. A detailed chart appeared on the large screen with precise colors and numbers. "As you can see," Tyler pointed to the colored bars, "my father worked an average of 8 hours a day. My mother worked 16 hours, 8 at her cleaning job and 8 at home. The difference is her work was never counted in the family's assets." Richard stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Domestic work doesn't generate assets." "You're mistaken, Doctor." Tyler turned to him calmly. "According to the Violence Against Women Act of 2006, domestic work is recognized as an economic contribution. And based on Supreme Court precedent 642... "Enough!" Richard shouted. "I won't be humiliated by a child." The judge banged his gavel. "Doctor, Richard, control yourself or you'll be removed from the courtroom." "Your Honor," Tyler continued, unshaken, "I'd also like to present proof of the savings generated by my mother's work." He opened a box full of papers, organized in color-coded folders. "Here are 1,147 receipts for expenses she saved the family. Cleaning services, cooking, childcare, laundry, gardening, basic home maintenance." Judge William flipped through some of the receipts. They were all organized by date and category, with market-researched values. "You did all this alone?" "Yes, Your Honor. I researched the average prices for each service online and calculated how much the family saved thanks to my mother's unpaid work." Brian finally spoke up. "This is impossible. A child can't do these kinds of calculations." Tyler faced him for the first time. "Dad, do you remember the last time you showed up for a parent-teacher meeting?" "That's irrelevant. It was 5 years ago. In fact, you never came. Mom was always the one who went, even after working late." A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Jennifer began to cry quietly, realizing for the first time how much her son had observed and endured. "And do you know how many times you helped me with homework?" Tyler continued. "0. Mom taught me to read after coming home exhausted from work." Richard tried to intervene. "Your Honor, this is emotional blackmail." "It's not blackmail, Doctor," said Tyler. "These are facts. I've kept all the school planners from these years, each one signed by my mother." Judge William Harris was clearly impressed. In 40 years as a judge, he'd never seen anything like it. "Tyler, you're saying you learned all this in 6 months at the library?" "Yes, sir, I read very fast, and I have a good memory." "How much can you memorize?" "Well, I memorized the entire Constitution in 2 weeks, and the Civil Code in a month." Ms. Peterson, the secretary, whispered something to the clerk. She'd checked all the boys' citations, and they were correct. Richard asked for a 15-minute recess. He was visibly shaken and needed to regroup. During the break, a social worker assigned to the case approached Jennifer. "Mrs. Parker, your son's school sent some letters home. Did you receive them?" "What letters?" "About IQ testing and gifted programs. Apparently he qualified, but no one responded." Jennifer felt her legs weaken. "The letters..." She vaguely remembered some school mail, but always assumed they were bills or complaints. Out of time and fear, she never opened them. "He's gifted?" The test showed an IQ of 182. That's considered genius level. Tyler was across the room, organizing his papers. He hadn't heard the conversation, but noticed his mother looked even more anxious. "Mom, are you okay?" "Son, why didn't you ever tell me you were this smart?" Tyler hugged her. "I just wanted to help you. I saw how much this case was hurting you, but how did you find time to study so much? Whenever I went with you to your cleaning jobs, I brought books from the library. While you worked, I studied in the corners." Jennifer remembered all the times Tyler insisted on joining her on weekends. She thought he was trying to help, but he'd been studying. The recess ended, and Richard returned with a new strategy. He'd quickly searched online and discovered the boy's IQ. "Your Honor, he said with a strained smile. "We've learned this child has exceptional abilities, an IQ of 182. This changes everything." "How so?" asked the judge. "A gifted child needs special resources, tailored education, intellectual stimulation, opportunities only my client can provide. The mother, a mere cleaner, can't nurture his potential." Tyler stood again. "Dr. Thompson, have you heard of Lewis Terman's longitudinal study on gifted individuals?" Richard fell silent. He hadn't expected that. The study followed gifted children for 70 years and found the key to success wasn't money, but emotional support and family stability. Tyler continued. High IQ children from unstable homes underperformed compared to those with consistent family support. "Where did you get that?" Richard grew desperate. "I read it at Columbia University's library. On Saturdays, when my mom cleaned downtown offices, I'd go there to study. The librarian, Mrs. Collins, always let me in." Judge Harris was stunned. The boy had turned a custody battle into a lesson in psychology and sociology. "Tyler," the judge said, "do you have anything else to share?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to cite international precedents on emotional development versus financial resources." Richard tried to object, but his voice wavered. "Your Honor, international precedents don't apply under U.S. law." "Actually, Doctor," Tyler opened another file, "the Federal Supreme Court has referenced international precedents in family cases. I'd like to cite case number—" "No," shouted Richard, completely losing his composure. "This is humiliation. I won't be disgraced by a child." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the courtroom stared at the millionaire lawyer who had just had a public meltdown. Judge Williams slammed his gavel forcefully. "Dr. Thompson, you are in contempt. One more word and you'll be arrested." Richard took a deep breath, trying to regain control, but the damage was done. He had lost all credibility before the judge. Tyler seized the moment. "Your Honor, I'd like to request the annulment of 3 prior motions in this case. Dr. Thompson committed a serious procedural error by attempting to intimidate a minor witness." "What witness?" asked Judge William. "Myself. Technically, I'm a witness to my mother's contributions to the family estate. And according to Article 212 of the United States Civil Code, it's a crime to intimidate witnesses." Richard turned pale. The boy was right. Technically, he had made a grave mistake. "Furthermore," Tyler continued, "I'd like to request a review of all prior motions based on the assumption that my mother didn't contribute to the estate. I have documents here proving indirect contributions of 847,350 suras. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. Brian finally stood up, visibly furious. "Enough. This is ridiculous. Jennifer, what have you done to our son? You've turned him into a machine." "Dad," Tyler faced him, "Mom didn't turn me into anything. She just gave me love and taught me that education is the only asset no one can take from us." "Don't talk to me like that. I'm your father." "You're my biological father. But the one who raised me, educated me, and cared for me was my mother. You don't even know what grade I'm in." Brian fell silent. It was true. He had no idea about his son's school life. "Besides," Tyler went on, "you want the house I grew up in, but you never asked if I want to live with you. According to the Child and Adolescent Protection Act, my opinion must be considered." Judge William leaned forward. "Tyler, would you like to live with your father?" The boy looked at Brian, then at his mother, who was silently crying. "Your Honor, I want to stay with the person who's always been there for me. The one who took me to the doctor when I was sick, who taught me my first numbers, who worked twice as hard so I'd never go hungry. I want to stay with my mum." Jennifer could no longer hold back. She stood up and hugged her son tightly. "Son, forgive me for putting you through this. Mom, you taught me to fight for what's right, and it's right for you to keep our home." The moment moved everyone in the room. Even Mrs. Peterson wiped away a tear. Brian tried to step closer. "Tyler, son, I can give you opportunities your mother can't. Private school, special classes, trips." "Dad, do you think intelligence can be bought?" Tyler met his gaze. I learned to be smart in the public library, with borrowed books, talking to my mom about life. You can buy an expensive school, but you can't buy what my mother gave me, unconditional love. But you need special opportunities. I have them. My mom is my greatest opportunity. When she comes home tired from work but still sits with me to ask about my day, that's worth more than any fancy school. Richard played his last card. Your Honor, I request a psychological evaluation of the child. She may be emotionally influencing him. Doctor, Tyler said calmly, would you like me to cite the criteria for forensic psychological evaluation? I can explain the difference between influence and the natural development of emotional bonds. Richard gave up. He simply sat down and said nothing more. Judge, Fernando was impressed not only by the boy's knowledge but also by his emotional maturity. Tyler, do you understand that your mother has financial difficulties, that she might not be able to pay for the special education you deserve? Your Honor, I researched that too. There are 47 public programs for gifted children in the state of New York. I've already applied to 3, and besides, Tyler pulled more papers from his folder. I've already created a business plan for my mom to start a cleaning company. With the clients she already has, I calculated that in 2 years, she could have an income 300% higher than what she earns now. Jennifer looked at her son, stunned. When did you do all this? Late at night, Mom, while you were sleeping. I researched online how to start a business, how to make a business plan, how to calculate profitability. Tyler, Judge William Harris was genuinely curious. How many hours a day do you study? About 6 hours, Your Honor. I wake up at 5 a.m. to study before school. At school during free time I read. After school I go with my mom to her jobs and study more. At night when she's tired I stay quiet and study so I don't bother her. And when do you play? Studying is my favorite way to play, especially math and science, but I also like reading about history and geography. Brian muttered to Richard, this kid is crazy. Children should play, not study like a maniac. Tyler heard him and replied, Dad, everyone has their own way of being happy. I'm happy when I'm learning, and I'm happy seeing my mom proud of me. It's not normal for a child to prefer books over toys. Maybe it's not normal, but it's who I am. And my mom accepts me as I am. She's never tried to change me. Judge William Harris decided to ask some technical questions to truly test the boy's knowledge. Tyler, can you explain the concept of interstate succession in civil law? Yes, Your Honor. Interstate succession is when there's no will and the inheritance is distributed according to the order established in the United States Civil Code. First to descendants, then to ascendants, then to the spouse, then to collateral relatives up to the 4th degree. And adverse possession, acquiring property through prolonged use. Ordinary adverse possession requires 10 years with just title and good faith, or extraordinary adverse possession requires 15 years without additional requirements. But if it's an urban property up to 250 square meters for housing, it can be just 5 years. Did you memorize the entire civil code? Not word for word, Your Honor. But I understand all the concepts and can recall the main articles. It's like learning a new language. Richard was in shock. In his entire career, he had studied with the best, earned advanced degrees from the most expensive universities, and now he was being outshone by a 10-year-old who learned law at the public library. Your Honor, Richard said, his voice defeated, I'd like to withdraw my client's claim for the house. What do you mean? Brian turned to him, furious. Mr. Brian, technically the boy is correct about everything. Your ex-wife did indirectly contribute to the household assets, and that gives her rights to the house. Plus, we made procedural mistakes that could hurt you in other aspects of the divorce. Brian turned red with anger. You're the most expensive lawyer in New York City. How can you lose to a kid? Because this kid knows more about the law than many attorneys I know, Richard admitted humbly. Then I'll represent myself. Dad, Tyler turned to him, if you want to represent yourself, you'll need to file a withdrawal of Dr. Richard's representation and request time to submit a new defense. But considering we're already in the judgment phase, the judge might deny your request. Brian stared at his son as if he were an alien. How could a 10-year-old know more about legal proceedings than he did? Dr. William decided he had heard enough. I'm granting a new 30-minute recess so the parties can talk and see if they reach an agreement. During the recess, a crowd formed around Tyler. Lawyers who had been watching the trial wanted to speak with him. "Son, where did you really learn all this?" asked a young female attorney. "At the library, ma'am, and by talking to people. My mum always told me every person knows something we don't." "Do you have plans for the future?" "I want to finish high school soon and go to law school, but first I want to help my mom set up her business." "What kind of business?" "Commercial cleaning. She has a talent for it and already knows many clients. She just needs organization and startup capital." Jennifer was leaning against the wall, still trying to process everything that had happened. "Mom," Tyler approached her, "are you mad at me?" "Mad? Honey, I'm proud, but I'm also scared. Since when do you know all these things?" "Since forever, Mom. I just never had the chance to show it." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because you already had too much to worry about. I didn't want to be another one." Jennifer hugged her son tightly. "My boy, you could never be a worry. You're my pride." "Mom, no matter what happens today, we'll be okay. I promise." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I learned from you that when we do what's right, things work out." Across the hallway, Brian was talking nervously with Richard. "How do we fix this? I can't walk out of here defeated by a kid." "Mr. Brian, your son isn't an ordinary child. He's a genius. And technically, he's right about everything. So what do I do? Accept defeat with dignity, and maybe take this chance to get to know your son better. He's extraordinary." "Extraordinary? He's weird. Kids should play, not study law." "Mr. Brian, your son chose to study because he wanted to protect his mother. That shows character, not strangeness." When the recess ended, everyone returned to their seats. Judge William noticed Brian was calmer but still seemed conflicted. "Have the parties reached any agreement?" the judge asked. Richard stood up. "Your Honor, my client agrees to withdraw the claim for the house, but he'd like to negotiate a more flexible visitation arrangement with his son." Tyler also stood. "Your Honor, regarding visitation, I'd like to share my opinion." "Go ahead." "I'd like to get to know my father better, but I want him to know me as I really am, not as he wishes I were." Brian sighed. "What does that mean?" "It means if you want me to spend weekends at your house, you have to accept that I'll bring books, that I like studying, that I prefer libraries over malls. But that's not normal." "Dad, normal is relative. To me, it's normal to be curious about everything. It's normal to want to learn, and it's normal to love my mum above all else." Judge William was impressed by the boy's maturity. He decided to ask a direct question. "Tyler, do you forgive your father for the hardships he caused your mother?" The boy thought for a long moment. "Your Honor, I don't hold grudges, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let resentment consume me." "And would you like to have a relationship with your father?" "Yes, but a real one, based on who I really am, not who he wants me to be." Brian stood up. "Tyler, I didn't know you were so smart." "Dad, the intelligence was always there. You just never paid attention. I want to try. I want to get to know you properly. Then you'll have to accept that I'm different, that I like things other kids don't, and that my mom is the most important person in my life." "I accept." Judge William Harris smiled. Perhaps that family could truly rebuild. "Very well. I will now deliver my ruling." Everyone stood up. The courtroom fell completely silent. After hearing all arguments and considering the evidence presented in an unconventional yet convincing manner, I rule as follows. First, the House shall remain with the respondent, Jennifer Parker, considering her proven indirect contribution to the family estate. Jennifer breathed a sigh of relief and squeezed her son's hand. Second, unrestricted visitation between father and son is hereby established, always respecting the child's wishes and well-being. Third, the petitioner Brian Parker shall fully fund the special education of the minor Tyler, including gifted programs. And finally, Judge Harris looked directly at Tyler. I insist on recommending this young man for a full scholarship in the Accelerated Learning Program at Columbia University. Rarely do we see such knowledge and maturity in someone so young. The courtroom erupted in applause. Tyler hugged his mother tightly as she cried with relief and pride. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers tremendously. Now continuing as Richard Thompson approached them in the hallway. Tyler, may I speak with you for a moment? Of course, Doctor. I'd like to apologize. In 30 years of practice, I've never been humiliated like this. But I recognize you were right about everything. Dr. Thompson, you weren't humiliated. You learned. There's a difference. How so? You've spent your entire career representing wealthy people against poor people. Perhaps today you learned that justice isn't about money. Richard fell silent for a moment. You're right, and I'd like to make you an offer. What offer? When you graduate from law school, I'd like you to work at my firm as a partner, not an employee. Tyler smiled. Thank you, Doctor, but I already have other plans. What plans? I'm going to open my own practice, specifically to defend people like my mother. People who can't afford expensive lawyers, but deserve equal justice. And how will you get the capital to open a practice? With the business plan I created for my mother. In 2 years, she'll have a solid enough company to help me open the practice. Richard shook his head, impressed. You've truly thought of everything. My mother taught me to plan. She always said, son, poor people can't afford not to have a plan. Meanwhile, Brian approached Jennifer. Jennifer, I want to apologize. For what, Brian? For not valuing what you did. For not realizing our son is special. For being an idiot. Brian, what matters now is Tyler. He needs his father. Do you really forgive me? I forgive you, but I don't forget. And most importantly, I won't let you hurt our son. I swear I'll try to be a better father. Don't try. Be one. As they left the courthouse, Tyler held his mother's hand. Mom, can I tell you something? Of course, son. I was afraid you'd be ashamed of me. Ashamed? Why? Because I'm different from other kids, because I like studying more than playing. Jennifer stopped and knelt before her son. Tyler, you're the greatest pride of my life. Not because you're smart, but because you're a good person. Because you have character, because you fight for what's right. Even though I'm weird. You're not weird. You're special. And I love you exactly as you are. I love you too, Mom. And I promise I'll use my intelligence to always take care of you. Son, you don't need to take care of me, too. I'm the one who takes care of you. Mom, taking care of each other doesn't have an age limit, it's a choice. 3 months later, Tyler was enrolled in an accelerated learning program. At 10 years old, he attended high school classes in the morning and helped his mother with the new business in the afternoon. The cleaning company, Parker & Sons, already had 15 employees and contracts with 20 businesses. Jennifer discovered she had a natural talent for management, and Tyler handled all the financial and legal matters. Brian faithfully kept up with his visitation schedule. At first it was difficult, but little by little he learned to value the conversations with his son about books, science, and plans for the future. Dad, Tyler said during one of the visits, have you ever thought about using your company for social projects? What do you mean? You own a construction company. You could build affordable housing, renovate schools, or build sports courts in underprivileged communities, but that doesn't make a profit. Sometimes profit isn't just money, Dad. It's personal satisfaction. It's about leaving the world a little better. Brian began to realize he had a lot to learn from his son. A year later, at 11 years old, Tyler passed the law school entrance exam. The news made headlines in all the newspapers. 11-year-old boy accepted to Columbia. On enrollment day, Jennifer cried with pride, Son, are you sure you want to study law? Yes, Mom. I want to be a lawyer to defend people who need help but can't afford it. And you won't forget to be a kid? Mom, I've told you before. Being a child or an adult isn't about age. It's about responsibility and character. You're too wise for your age. I learned from you that wisdom comes from suffering turned into love. At the university, Tyler was met with curiosity from his classmates. At first it was difficult, but he soon earned everyone's respect with his humility and generosity. Whenever a classmate struggled, he helped. If someone couldn't afford books, he lent his. During group projects, he always chose the students others rejected. Tyler, a professor, once asked, "Why do you always help those who struggle the most?" "Professor, my mother taught me that intelligence only matters if it's used to help others." "And you don't feel superior to your classmates?" "How could I? They have life experiences I don't. They know things I don't. Intelligence is just a tool. What matters is how you use it." At 15, Tyler graduated with honors in law, becoming the youngest lawyer in United States history. On graduation day, he gave a speech that moved everyone. "First, I thank my mother, who taught me that education is the only treasure no one can steal, who showed me that true love isn't shielding your child from hardship, but giving them the strength to face it. I thank my father, who learned from me that it's never too late to change, who discovered that being a father isn't just about providing money, but giving attention, affection, and setting an example. And I thank everyone who doubted me, because their doubt made me want to prove that a poor child can indeed change the world, one person at a time." Jennifer cried in the audience. Beside her, Brian wiped away a tear. "Jennifer," Brian whispered, "our son is incredible." "He always was. You just weren't paying attention." "I know, but I'm trying to be better." "And you're succeeding." After graduation, Tyler opened his law office as he had promised, Parker Community Law Office. His first case was a cleaning woman being unfairly fired, the second a construction worker who hadn't been paid in 3 months, the third a housewife losing her home because she couldn't keep up with payments. In 5 years, the firm grew and became a reference in labor and family law. Tyler hired 20 lawyers, all with the same purpose, defending those in greatest need. At 20, Tyler was invited to give a lecture at the same university where he had graduated. The theme, social justice and transformative education. "When I was 10 years old," he began, "I walked into a courtroom for the first time to defend my mother. A lot of people laughed. They thought it was a child's game. Today, 10 years later, I've helped over 1,000 families find justice. Not because I'm special, but because I had a mother who taught me that intelligence without compassion is just vanity." You who are graduating now have a choice, to use your knowledge to enrich yourselves or to transform lives. I chose to transform. And I chose it because I learned that true success isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the number of lives you can positively touch. In the audience, Jennifer Parker was beaming. At 55, she was a successful businesswoman but remained simple and humble. Her company now had 50 employees, and she made it a point to know each of their stories. Brian Parker was also there. He had transformed his construction company into one focused on social projects, building affordable housing, renovating schools, and creating a vocational training program for low-income youth. "Son," Brian said after the speech, "I wanted to ask you something." "What is it, Dad?" "I'd like you to be my partner in the construction company. Together we can do so much more." Tyler smiled. "Dad, I already have a partnership." "With who?" "With Mom. She handles the administrative side of the office and I handle the legal side. We've been a team for a long time. Can I join that team?" "Of course, Dad. There's always room. That's what family is, always space for more love." 5 years later, Parker and family had become a business group dedicated to social projects. Tyler oversaw the legal side, Jennifer managed administration, and Brian led construction. Together, they created the largest affordable housing program in the state, renovated 200 schools, and established 15 vocational training centers. At 25, Tyler was named the most influential lawyer in the country by Time magazine. But for him, the greatest reward remained his mother's proud smile. "Mom," he said one evening after work, "do you remember that day in court?" "How could I forget? It was the day I discovered my son was a genius." "I wasn't a genius, Mom, just a boy who didn't want to see you suffer." "And today, what are you now?" "Today, I'm a man who learned from you that true love means serving others." "You don't have plans to marry, have children?" "I do, but I want to be sure I'll be a present father, just like you taught me to expect from my own." And what kind of woman do you want? One who understands that my first priority will always be taking care of you. Jennifer smiled. Son, you don't have to take care of me forever. Mom, it's not an obligation, it's a choice. And I'll always choose to care for the one who cared for me. 2 years later, Tyler met Emma, an educator who worked in underserved schools. She admired him not for his fame or money, but for his character and humility. Emma, Tyler said on their first date, I need to tell you something important. What? My mother is the most important person in my life. She always will be. And that's a problem? For some women, yes. For me, it's a virtue. A man who loves his mother will always know how to love his family. They married 2 years later in a simple ceremony. Jennifer cried with emotion when Emma called her mom for the first time. Jennifer, Emma said, thank you for raising the most honorable man I know. Emma, he's yours now. Take good care of him. I will, but I'll never try to replace you. I'll try to complement you. Today, Tyler is 30, with 2 young children and still leading his social projects. Jennifer, at 65, is a doting grandmother and continues working as a consultant for small businesses. Brian retired, but he spends his days playing with his grandchildren and helping with volunteer projects. Grandpa, asks his 5-year-old granddaughter, is it true that Daddy defended Grandma in court when he was a kid? It's true, my princess. And why did he do that? Because he loved Grandma very much, and true love makes us capable of anything. Will I defend Mommy too when I grow up? I'm sure you will, because you have the same heart as your father. On the wall of Tyler's office, there's a photo from that day in court. Him at 10 years old, holding Jennifer's hand as they walked out of the courthouse. Below it, a phrase he insisted on writing, I dedicate everything I've achieved to the woman who taught me that intelligence without love is empty, but love with intelligence can change the world. End of story. So what did you think of this touching story? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Do you believe a mother's love can truly transform a child like this? Share your honest opinion, and don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that will touch your heart.